Okay, so we realize now that if you got a perfect square, the solving kind of become easier. So like in example 8, because of the perfect square format, you can solve it faster. So sometimes we will create the method. That's why we will create the method called complete square method. Okay, so this one is a bit difficult, so you just have to be very mindful. So if you look at the box, okay, if you would like to create a perfect square, so this is the perfect square that we are talking about. So anything square is perfect square. So currently this one is not a perfect square yet. So the method to make it into a perfect square is, okay, I'm going to add this part. So if you look at it, I'm going to be adding this and it will become a perfect square. Okay, so this is like a formula. So let's observe what are you adding. So do you realize what are you adding here? So you are adding the coefficient of x over 2 with a square. So sometimes some people will call it a b. So some people will, because if it's in this format, it is actually b. It doesn't matter. So whatever is it, right? We are adding the coefficient of x divided by 2 with a square. And then the perfect square that we gotten will be x plus coefficient of x over 2 with a square. So this is the perfect square. So we are adding this and to get a perfect square like this. So we are going to explore two types of questions. Okay, in example 9, the question is what must be added to the expression to obtain a perfect square? So we are adding the coefficient of x dividing by 2 with a square. So what are you adding? So first of all, you take note of the coefficient first. So the coefficient of x is positive 5. So you are going to add 5 over 2 squared. And we are getting a perfect square of x plus 5 over 2 squared. Okay, so how does that work? Okay, let's try to observe a little bit. So now I'm going to add 5 over 2 squared. So I'm going to add a 5 over 2 squared. So let's look at what happened when you add a 5 over 2 squared. So when I add a 5 over 2 squared, actually I got 25 over 4. So you can try your factorization method. You can try your factorization method. Okay, you or the tic-tac-toe method, whichever method you will try. If you try already, you find that you actually got this double bracket, which essentially is the perfect square. So that is actually what happened. So when you add the coefficient of x over 2 square, you can make it into a perfect square. So we cut short the factorization. So we actually don't need to show this part. So this part is just the thinking. Okay, so to answer the question, for part A, I am adding this and I will get the perfect square. So I am adding this and I will be getting this as the perfect square. Okay, so let's look at the next question. So in the next question, okay, the coefficient of x is -4. So I am adding -4 over 2 squared. So when I add, I will get the perfect square of x plus -4 over 2 squared. So you simplify the perfect square. Simplify -4 divided by 2 is a -2. So this is the perfect square. So let's observe what actually happened. So I'm going to be adding this. So after I add this, you punch calculator on this, it will give you a 4. So you can factorize it. Okay, do your normal factorization. You realize that you will get x minus 2, x minus 2. Okay, so this is the part that I'm not going to, you don't need to show. You can just use it as a formula. So this part is the formula. So you add this, and this will be the perfect square. So the question can be asking you in this way. So what must be added in order to obtain a perfect square? Okay, but sometimes the question will be phrased this way. Most of the time, it will be phrased like example 10. The question says that you are supposed to complete square for each of the following. If you observe example 9 and example 10, it's exactly the same question. So do you realize it's actually the same question? Okay, you observe example 8, example 9 and example 10. They are the same question. So what is the difference? Okay, so the idea when you need to complete square for something is you must make sure that you don't disturb the balance of it. So in this case, we know that we need to add. Okay, so look at this part. We need to add this in order to get the perfect square. Okay, so you cannot be adding something for no reason. So if you add something for no reason, you actually got to subtract away. So this part essentially is a 0. So they are still the same thing. So the expression is still the same. It is still the same x squared plus 5x. Okay, but you added the thing that you would like to make it into a perfect square. So this part will become the perfect square here. So this part will become the perfect square here. And then this part, you can punch calculator. So this can be expressed as this. So if you expand out this part, right, you are getting the same answer. So you introduce something to create a perfect square, but you cannot introduce something and explode the value of the expression. So that's why you got to minus off that item that you added in. So like for this question, x squared minus 4x. So we know that I need to add this to achieve a perfect square. So you don't add in something for no reason. So it's not, it won't be equal already if you suddenly add in something. So actually, I'm supposed to subtract whatever I decide to add in. So this part has a value 0. So the original expression essentially it's still the same. So this is the part that a lot of people couldn't understand. Why you add something and then you minus. So the reason why I add something and then I subtract is to create a value 0. That means, right, it's something like the expression is still the same. So I don't disturb the value of the original expression. But because of what I decide to add in, this will be the perfect square that I gotten. And this part, you will punch calculator. Okay, so if they ask you what would you need to add, then you will be adding coefficient of x over 2 with a square. And what is the perfect square that you are going to obtain? But then, right, if you need to complete square for any expression, you got to add something and subtract away the thing that you actually chose to add in. Okay, so in a way, I will be doing this. So if I need to complete square, right, I will do this. I will add the coefficient of x over 2 square, and I will subtract it away. So that will be the generic idea that you will need to do. Okay, if it's a bit confusing, okay, what I suggest is, right, you aim for the technical process. It's actually quite easy if you just follow the steps. Okay, don't overthink the concept. So you added something and then you minus something. So that part will create a value 0. So this part is to ensure that you didn't disturb the balance of the expression. So this part is actually a 0. So that's exactly what you will be doing a lot of time when you try to do a complete square. So maybe you got to try slowly on this part first.